Hi, welcome back. This video is going to be for you if you struggle with the labels around trauma and addiction. So if you're feeling ashamed because you are an addict or you've been an addict or you have trauma, if you feel less than, if you feel like a piece of shit, if you feel guilty, if you feel kind of left out and different, then you're definitely going to want to stay to the end of this video, because what I'm going to talk about is my experience with both of these labels, because I have extensive experience with them, and some of the things I've come to realize about those terms and ways that we can reframe them to take the stigma out so that we can actually feel just like everybody else, because we are in the end. So stay tuned. My name is Adam and welcome back. So, do you have stigmas around trauma? Do you have stigmas around addiction? I'll just tell a brief story about my experience with these things. I started going to therapists when I was about 14 years old because I come from a long line of mental illness. Okay, I've come from a good family, but there was a lot of mental illness. My grandma was bipolar, like crazy bipolar, back in the days of like electroshock therapy and psych wards and all of that stuff. She came to live with us when I was 10, and okay, it's rampant in my family. And so is alcoholism. And when I was 14, I started to feel just really depressed. I didn't realize I actually had always been depressed. And my parents began to take me to therapists. This was before I got into drugs to, self-medicate. And I always felt just kind of off in therapy. And I love therapy. I'm not knocking therapy, but the old kind of traditional method has some issues with it, I would suggest. I always felt judged, right? I would kind of sit there on the couch, and there was the traditional therapist in the nice chair with his legs crossed and the clipboard, and it always felt to me like he was kind of looking down at me and like he was critiquing me almost to discern whether or not I was ready or able to integrate into society, or if I was just too fucked up. And he was going to, prescribe meds or do therapy a bit and then kind of make a distinction. And I never felt safe, which I've come to understand is the most important thing in healing trauma and addiction. Because I always was like, well, what have you gone through? Like, what's your shit? And how am I supposed to feel comfortable when I feel less than? It always felt very rigid. And I didn't really get it because I knew he wasn't perfect. I knew he had his stuff. And I felt like I was just a specimen that was kind of studied in a book, which is the last thing that's going to help anybody heal. And so I walked away feeling like, mental illness or depression or trauma meant I was just fucked up. And the same thing with being an addict. I was in rehab for 2 years and 12-step programs, and they were really, really amazing, and they helped me a lot. But one of the things that I walked away with there too was this belief that, I'm worse. I'm fucked up in a way that other people aren't, right? I'm an addict and I will always be an addict. I'm a selfish, self-centered, self-seeking sort of scumbag kind of, outcasty person. And of course there were selfish, self-seeking behaviors in my addiction. Of course there were, but that label, long term, began to really eat at me. And what I found the irony was those labels, or those things, having trauma and being an addict, actually come from separation. So a perception that you're less than or worse than or sicker than is only perpetuating what caused those things to begin with. Right? And there are some good aspects to this, right? If you have a bad drug addiction, that's a serious thing. You can die. And you can't solve a problem if you don't identify it and own it. So stating I'm an addict, I'm an alcoholic is important for a while. I'll get to that in another video. Long term, it can be damaging, but for a while, it's important because you're owning it. You're taking responsibility for it. You're admitting you have an issue, and you're calling it forth. The problem, though, is when we act like we're the only ones with trauma or we're the only ones with addiction. We're not. Everybody has trauma. Everyone is a fucking addict. And Gabor Mate's talking about this a lot, and I'm very grateful to him. We all have addictions. People are addicted to sex. They're addicted to money. They're addicted to relationships. They're addicted to power. They're addicted to beating themselves up, right? Do you relate to this? Do you relate to feeling different and then going like, yeah, but I'm really not? Well, you're not. You really aren't. And again, the antidote is inclusion and understanding we're all in this together. So I suggest, or what I like to do, is redefine those terms, right? Like, what is trauma? And I have a video called What is Trauma you can check out too. What is trauma? To me, trauma is anything that takes us out of our natural state. And what is our natural state? Love and joy, which puts basically everyone in that boat, right? If you look around the world you live in, do you see a whole bunch of people that look like they really know what they're doing mentally, emotionally, and spiritually? No, we're all, as part of being human, is we're all kind of a mess. And when we own that, we can get better. But you're never going to be perfect, right? I'm not saying that you would be in love and joy all the time. Part of being human is the darkness. It is the trauma. But when we all have it, it's different. Same thing with addiction. What is addiction? Essentially, addiction is a habit, right? That's not beneficial for you, that you just keep doing in spite of the fact that it's bad. Everyone does that. The mind essentially is an addiction. It's running programs that are non-beneficial all the time in spite of the fact that it's kind of hurting itself and hurting the body, right? We all are like that. It's the human experience. And when we destigmatize these words, it dissolves all of the pain. It starts to dissolve the pain and the separation. That's what addiction comes from. Separation. Separation from the all. Separation from love. Separation from each other. Trauma and addiction, basically the same thing. And when we destigmatize these terms, we can start to heal the things too collectively. We can start to heal the mind collectively when we remove the judgment. I mean, even saying like it's doing things that are bad for us. I mean, it's doing things that are non-beneficial. There's something called the 100th monkey syndrome that I'm very fascinated with. And what it shows is like, if 100 monkeys on a particular like side of an island all learn something, a monkey on the other side that never had any connection whatsoever to those monkeys, a different monkey, will all of a sudden pick that up on its own. That's part of the interconnectedness of everything. We're all connected through this, giant cosmic consciousness field. So as we start to destigmatize these labels and judgments, we actually begin to collectively heal the patterns of addiction and trauma together. And then we can start to create a reality where being human isn't so much being in trauma all the time. Like right now, that's kind of collectively what it is, and it's good to accept that. But when it's accepted and accepted and accepted and included, we will all have less trauma. And then being a human will more so be being in love and joy, the vast majority of the time. But it starts with how we see it all. Now, it can be complicated, the healing process. It can be complicated addressing these things. And like I said, if you have a really gnarly addiction to something that can kill you really quickly, like I did, like I was a bad junkie, right? You want to be wary of that and you want to own that. But can you own that without beating yourself up and feeling less than? Can you own that without taking on the imprints kind of from out there of like, oh, you know, you outcast, you weirdo, you black sheep? And can you see that as a gift in the making? It's like the darker the night, the brighter the star, right? The bigger the shadow, the bigger the potential for the light. I mean, my friend says this thing. She says addicts are the modern day shamans. And that is what they are. There's a lot of really sensitive, powerful, creative people out there. And almost because of that, they get kind of targeted and they have more trauma because they're more sensitive to the light, so they're more sensitive to the dark. And they're transmuting all of this stuff, but we tend to get stuck in it, right? And when we see it as the gift, and when we see it as like the pulling back of the arrow that launches you forward, it shifts. When you see everyone as part of this group, it makes a big difference. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments, please. Like I said, I have a video called What is Trauma that you can watch that might help a little bit more with this concept. Please like and subscribe to the channel. It helps me a lot. And I thank you very much and look forward to next time.